might be something interesting to sort of slide in a little bit. Maybe later on when the audience is matured with
Right.
this.
Yeah. Those therapy sessions.
I did in high school. All right, we're live officially, I guess now. Aaron, welcome back. We are sliding in here, just trying to, the wonderful thing about this engagement is two African American men talking about something positive, which I think is something that the world needs in general, especially in lieu of seeing two African American men fight in the public arena, i.e., 50 Cent and Puff Daddy. Seems to be the major icons of black on black social media crime. So with that, I do like this. It's interesting. The thing about talking to your high school people that you went to high school with, and we weren't in the same circles, and I was a little bit of a loner. I guess I knew everybody, but I don't think I was like, I don't think I was aiming for popularity, but I always thought I was a loner. But the different perspectives in high school, like you have your perspective and I have my perspective. We were just talking about it a little bit, but I was like, the thing that stood out to me was that I got in a lot of fights. And you're like, Larry, I didn't even know you got in fights. Like, yeah, I got whooped a couple times. Got my butt handed to me a couple times. That'd be interesting coming into the conversation from that type of discussion point. What was your experience in high school? Like, what were the ups and downs in high school?
Yeah, so actually, before talking about the fighting, we were talking about like Joe Thomas and the impact that he had on you, and like thinking about that. And one of the reasons why I went and decided to get my master's in counseling, and I wanted to be a high school counselor, was because, like, from my perspective, my experience, I was not at all engaged by counselors in high school. I tell the story all the time to like my kids, and I used to tell it, when I mentored kids, mentored students, etc. Is that like I walked into college completely blind. I had no clue how to get to college, navigate college. I wasn't ready for college. I wasn't like, I had zero idea what to do, how to do, why to do. And no counselor in the 4 years I was at West had any conversation with me about going. I remember like
interesting.
My guy, one of my best friends to this day, Aronn, he came up to me one day junior year. This was my like initiation to college conversation. He came up to me and he's like, "Yo, Aaron, we're putting together our room list for Witty at UW-Madison. I'm going to room with so-and-so, so-and-so, all these, here's who do you want to room with between these guys?" I'm like, "Oh, bet I think it was like Louis. I was like, "I'll room with Louis. Cool." And then then that was the end of the conversation. So like that very day I was like, what do I do? How do I, like, what room? I don't know what Witty is.
Like you just agreed to something you didn't quite know what you were doing.
I was just like, yeah, we're all going to UW. Let's go. I just thought that was the plan, and I didn't know what the process was. So I went to my counselor and I was like, "Hey, I need an application to UW-Madison." And she just told me where to get it. I went and got it. Like, didn't have any conversations with me about, boy, that's not where you're going. Like, you need to, like, here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to work on. Here's how you get there, blah, blah, blah. I hand wrote this essay with all types of like spelling and punctuation errors. And like, it was like, and I had no clue what I was doing. And there was no support. I didn't know how to access support to kind of walk me through this journey. And so I ended up going to MATC, and even there, like my parents my mother got a middle school education, right? Like that's not anything that they're preparing me for and talking with me about, and like giving me advice or guidance. So like I'm literally just wandering around trying to figure it out. And then, like the male ego, like I can't ask people. I'm not that stupid that I can't figure out how to get online at the college and what my username and password is. Those are things that I vividly remember. Like, I don't know what to do, and like I don't know who to ask or where to ask it. And so like I just walked around year and a half just completely blind and unprepared and unsuccessful. Like just then you feel like, leading into the mental health conversation, then you feel like this failure. You feel like somebody who's not capable and who's not able. And like I understand why so many people, like first generation kids, drop out, and it's so hard because like where do you get answers from? Where do you get support? And all through high school, I got nothing. I was told in elementary school and in middle school that I've got potential. I've got potential. But like, what does that mean? How do I great. That makes me feel good that people believe in me. But how do I manifest this potential that you're speaking of? Like, what is it that I need to do? And how do I do that? And like, nobody guided me along there. And so then when I was working at East High School, I remember a couple of things. One, I was on the scholarship committee. And we would have Black students that are, first generation, low income kids with like 3.4, 3.5, 3.6, 3.7 GPAs, like incredible, given the amount of effort, work, and poverty that they come from, and like having no support, no true like foundational background and knowledge from their families and all that. And then you've got the white kid that drives his parents' Audi to school, lives in the rich neighborhood. He's got a 4.0, and they're just like, oh, he's got to get this scholarship, or she's got to get it, because they've had a 4.0 all through high school, and they've worked so hard to maintain that. They have no care in the world. They have 2 college-educated parents. They've got scholarships coming from any and everywhere else, all the corners of the world. Like, they are fine. And they have this advantage of having parents guide them through. And so the students of color got left off of the scholarship list and recipients list because the white kids that had everything handed to them continue to get everything handed to them. And those white kids had relationships with the folks on the scholarship committee, the white teachers. And so like, oh, I know, I love Larry. Larry is so deserving. So then Aaron doesn't get anything because Aaron doesn't know. Like, right. So so then that lit me on fire. And then I was also in charge of truancy. So I handled all the truancy at East High School. And throughout the year, there were like 600 kids on the truancy list. So my job was to send this letter home and set up a meeting with every one of these students and families to try to work through like what's going on, that you're not in school, blah, blah, blah. And so this was kind of the time I went to my boss. I'm like, I'm getting my master's. I'm going to be a counselor. And like, we've got to change this because this is insane. I bet 90% of the Black students that that came across the truancy list, that I went and talked to their counselors, with the exception of like 2 counselors, maybe 3, be a junior. Like, so, tell me about, Larry and what you know about his journey through high school. He's a junior. He's been on your caseload for about 2 years. Oh, I don't know. I don't know him. Oh, okay. Well, how about Aaron? Tell me about Aaron. I don't know him either. Tell me about the next Black kid. I don't know him either. Like, these are juniors and seniors. How do you not know them? How do you not know anything about them? Like, what their transcript says, but there's no personal relationship. And so like, yeah, we wonder why our kids. So that really like hit home, because I wasn't a truant kid, but my counselor didn't know me. My counselor didn't reach out and like try to engage and say, hey man, you're a C student, you're an average kid, like, but you can do better. Let's figure out like what you want to do. Let's talk, let's have conversations and engage with you about like what your life plan is, what your goals are, and how you can reach those. And then here's the steps you need to take. Like, give me an opportunity to grow. Nobody did that. And so like through my experience as an adult educator, like that trend just continued. And so that kind of infuriated me and lit a fire to, like continue to dig deeper into this work and fight for our kids of color to get access.
Yeah. When you say it like that, I can't think of who my school counselors, but I know all of my multicultural counselors: Pamela Sword, Charles Cunningham, Joe Thomas. I know them like the back of my hand. I cannot remember my school counselor. Wow. Didn't even think of it until you said it like that. I actually thought all available.
Yeah.
You talked about when you talked about seeing that phenomena, was that a defining moment for you at all? Like, what was the defining moment that was like the straw that broke the camel's back kind of ish?
So yeah, it was that during that truancy period where I'm like, how are we ever going to be able, like, why, this is why our kids struggle so much, because there's zero connection.
Did, did you go because you're interested in it, or did you go out of advocacy?
Into counseling,
Yeah.
I went
What was the
because
motivation? Yeah.
because my motivation was, I can't sit and let this happen. Like,
Okay.
so I remember saying, like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to show all you counselors how you engage kids of color. Like,
Okay.
you give me kids of color on my caseload, and we're gonna graduate. A large percentage of these kids. I'm not gonna, like, my thought. Like, I was so pissed off. I was like, any white kid on my caseload, they're gonna get the attention I got. Right. And so, like, I was speaking out of anger, but
Right,
like,
right, right. The
my
moment in
my
time.
passion and my focus was going to be, of our black and brown kids, and how
Yeah.
we are growing and supporting them, and trying to give them the tools and access to be able to at least see what the world outside of high school and after high school looks like, and talk with them about, college access and what that looks like, and how to achieve and accomplish those goals, etc.
Aaron, when did you get your degree? They had been 10, 15 years ago. And it's really
Uh,
not
so
that long
this
ago.
was No, it hasn't been that long. So I started at East in 2013,
Okay.
and I enrolled in 2015, and so I was done with it like 2017. And as soon as I finished this, so here's the bad part. As soon as I finished, I moved into administration.
Oh, but the despair in the last 10 years, the disparity is that great at East
Yeah,
High School.
I mean, yeah, I would assume. Like, I don't think that there's. I haven't been to East since I left in 2017. Um,
Oh, okay.
but um,
But
you
even
know,
back then, that's only 10 years ago. I mean, that's a little over 10
yeah,
years ago.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was. I mean, those were the conversations I was having. Like, during that time at East, that was a scholarship committee I was on. That was, like, the truancy work that I was doing. Like, nobody, like, was advocating outside of me for our black and brown kids. So that's why they called me the counselor for black kids, because I was always like, anybody come and get into my office. Let's talk. Let's plan. I was building, the HBCU college tours with Johnny Milton and the crew over at La Follette, and Michelle Olsen at La Follette, right? And Joanne Brown at Memorial. And Sean Gray at West. We are building these HBCU tours, and we were all part of at MATC. They have these cultural college fairs. So they have one for Black students, one for Hispanic students, and one for Asian students, all separate, because they have specific and focused, um, like, presentations and access and scholarships, and et cetera, for those different ethnic groups. And so we were on the planning panel and doing all the recruiting to make sure our black and brown kids all got the opportunity to go there, so they can get access. They can understand and speak with folks from their community around, like, what it is, why it's important, right? And get some of this education.
Was there any difficulty or kickback, or where do you feel like the support was for those efforts?
I think there's plenty of support out there, right? My principal at the time, Mike Hernandez, was, he's a Latino principal. He was in full support of that. He believes in equity and that kind of thing. I don't know that there was any. I don't know if there was any pushback that I experienced. I think it's just like those microaggressions, right? And the perception of black and brown students just persist and pervade, in education and within a lot of folks, and willful ignorance of people not, being willing to engage.
There are those in a certain group of there's a certain group of people that would say that there are no current disparities in education.
Well, I mean, they're not looking at data if that's what they believe.
Well, they do it off I look at both sides of the coin. They are and I've had these conversations, and some would argue that the access to education is broad enough for anybody to be able to grasp onto the opportunities. People are just not grasping on the opportunities. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
what's your argument to that? I guess what's your argument to that? They say, okay, you got the statistics, but the education is there. You got free education. kids are not latching on, it's their fault. That the barriers are not there.
So then I would want some clarity on what barriers they're talking about. Is if it's simply access, then beyond access is education, right? Your child has access to be a collegiate athlete and get scholarships, but they're not. Why not? Right? Your child has access to be a doctor, but they're not. Why not? Right? So access is only one part of it. If a student doesn't feel welcome, doesn't feel appreciated, doesn't feel valued in that school setting by teachers and administrators, and that's a very real issue. You can look at all kinds of statistics when they talk to kids, like, do you feel welcome? No. Do you have a trusted adult at the school that you can talk to? No. Do you feel like, do you get here? I'll tell you right now, because this is something I'm actively working on out here in my community. We got these a couple of California reports that were released in 2024. So one of them, okay, in 2024, the Department of Justice released a study that they did from 2018 to 2022 that the most targeted group by hate crimes in schools were Black students.
Okay.
So that's happening in schools. So you're talking about access, hate crimes, like the most targeted group for hate crimes is Black students. In 2024, UCLA did a study of 100 principals. 67% of those principals said Black students were the most likely to be targets of racial offensive language, actions, etc. And a majority of Black students don't feel adults are giving them their best. So these are the statistics that back up the data that says, access to education still isn't equal, because even within these systems, there's all these racist microaggressions and issues and actions that are happening to our Black and brown students, because education is equally accessible doesn't mean that the actors that are providing this education have Black students' best interests in mind. That doesn't mean that you're not racist, and it doesn't mean that your mindset is that Black students can and should achieve at equal rates as white kids, right? So, the access could be there, but in reality, the belief in the system and the belief in the students is not.
Let me be devil's advocate and challenge that a little bit and say the barriers that are currently there are less than the barriers that we had in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And I might argue that it is easier, as it relates to our historical relationship with racism, easier for us to access education now than it was.
Mm-hmm.
Who ultimately should be responsible for that?
Responsible for
not getting access to education if historically we've had a better path than we had before, with the more conservative view saying, very much from a self-deterministic philosophy, that it really is at the end of the day, the responsibility of that student and their parents.
Right. And so then my argument, who bears the responsibility? I still think that, school, public education is a state and federal run program. So the responsibility still falls upon those state and federal governments to, one, continue to fund public education and fund these opportunities and provide these opportunities to do it. We know that the system of education that is archaic, that is from the same 60s and 70s, still has the same practices from the 60s and 70s that was inequitable and not targeted and geared towards Black and brown learning that still exists. So we have a responsibility to alter our educational system so it best serves all students. So we have differentiated learning and differentiated assistance for our students. And two, I think if we look at how kids are accessing it, like you still have your cultural connections. You still only can access education to a point of which you have reach. And what I mean by that is if we're looking at schools in our poorest communities that are the Black and brown schools, where is the opportunity for access? How does somebody access? Let's think of something that is kind of a benign uh, career, right? How does somebody access? Like a great one would be photography for McDonald's. How do you access that is a career that you can be a food photographer and you can set up food sets and commercials for all of these restaurants that do commercials. Does anybody know that exists? So how do I aspire to do that if that's something that I'm never exposed to? I'm exposed to doctors, lawyers, firemen, right? What do kids say that they want to be when they grow up? They say what they see, right? If you don't know anybody I don't know that, like, or I could be like, you could be a wholesale buyer for Tyson chicken and you could do the buying and work with farms there. You remember Tuffley from back in the day?
Yeah.
This man, he works in oil, but he works in like helping move various oil quantities and types around the country. Like how would I know that that's something I can do if I'm never exposed to that as a career opportunity? To say that sounds interesting and exciting. How do I learn more about that? How do I engage or investigate in that type of work? I took a group of students to American Family Insurance on a tour, one of my last years at East. And one of our students ended up getting an internship, and they were all Black males that I took. But and there was a partnership with AmFam, so we had so I had this AP and honors male boys group. So you had to be a Black male student in AP or honors, and every Friday I would buy you lunch, and we would just come together and we would just fellowship, because a lot of these kids were saying, like, I have maybe one class with my friends, otherwise I don't see them all day. I can work with maybe one or two people on, like my AP bio work, where my white friends are all together. They're all in the same class. They get to work and they have all these advantages. And so I brought this group together so they could just have a space to talk and connect and link. We had a very light agenda. Let's talk about like what you're experiencing, how you're feeling, how we can support one another, how we can bring more folks into this. How can we broaden the AP and honors spectrum to other Black and brown students to bring them in so they have access, very similar to like this education conversation. So some folks at American Family heard about what I was doing. They were like, yo, we've got a number of Black men here that want to be mentors. Can we come and mentor your kids? So then they gave me $10,000 to buy lunch all year.
Wow.
And they would come every Friday or every other Friday, and we would all just kind of meet and connect and gather. So then they took us on a tour of American Family Insurance. The president was a Black woman. She came and spoke. But then they took all these Black men that worked there. They took us to their departments, showed us around, talked about what they do, what their responsibilities are. And they're, like up there as, one of the tops in each of their department. And so that's eye-opening for these kids to say, oh, I thought insurance was just you crash your car, your house burns down, you get a check, you do this. Like, no, there's 100 other jobs within this organization that you can do. And these boys are like, oh, I do have an interest in that. I want to know more about, a claims adjuster. I could train people. I can blah, 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 blah. Like I can use my social skills. Those are the things that are going to change the face of education, is that access and exposure. But if we just have this stuff in the school and say, oh, well, it's accessible, you just have to know how to get it. When that's not a part of your culture, wasn't a part of your parents' education, that's not a part of your community reach, then how do you truly access those things? If it's things that aren't a part of your culture. And in white culture, those jobs, those careers, those opportunities, those friendships, that access has been a standard part of life since the inception of this country.
That language it's hard for somebody. I would imagine this language is hard for someone who believes that there is no difference, and ultimately no difference in the diversity of struggles between Black and white people.
Yeah. So one of the things, like, what my dad was born in 1949. What year was your dad born?
Um, he's like 60 some years old. My dad's in his late 60s, so I had to do reverse math on it. I do not know off the top of my head. I had to do math. Hold on a sec. I can do the math real quick. My dad's like 67. 67 minus 2025.
So yes, so it's 50 years ago was 1975.
1958.
And
Yeah.
then it's so how many?
19,
What was it?
1958.
1958. So your dad is a little bit older than mine. My dad was born in 1949. So I am the first generation full and free education in my family. My dad started education in segregated schools. The Brown versus Board of Education was not until 1954 when he was 6 years old and didn't take effect until he was at least 7, until it opened the doors. And still, think about like how many years, and even to this day, there's racist teachers who go and folks who don't believe in equal access, right? So like when people are like, oh, the access is the same, you still have to put it in the context. I am the first generation in my family that's had full and free education. My father started in segregated schools. His family's from Mississippi. So your family, as a white person, as a conservative, somebody who wants to argue that, you can just look at the timeline of how your educational framework has been established over decades and centuries of your father, your great-grandfather, your great-great-grandfather, blah, 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 had access to education, had access to, these tools that my family did not until now.
When I talk with diverse audiences, some of my clients are extremely diverse. I'm out in the Midwest, so I talk with all types. I mean, heck, some of my clients might be even racist. I don't even know it. But I talk with all types with all type of different background. The background that I find most fascinating is the farming community, rural farmers. And sometimes I get to see the backdrop of all the chaos that ensues in that type of environment. And you know what? I think about myself as as an African American, and I think of black pain and white pain because again, like I said, I have the benefit of seeing white pain sometimes, and then the thought comes to my mind, the idea of saying that what we're talking about breeds the connotation that black pain is more difficult than white pain. You know where I'm going with that? It's like it's a hard sell. The idea, the concept, the statistics surrounding disparity is a hard sell to people who are going through life difficulties. I mean, especially if you study the rural farm community, it's a harsh life. There's a harsh philosophy around it that it would be hard to sell black pain to somebody who embraces pain, brutality of pain on a daily basis, let alone goes through their own painful circumstances surrounding their own personal and family issues. You know what I mean? It's like,
but what's the end goal? What are we trying to do? Like, we're never going to make any headway in conversation if we're comparing pain to pain, right? Like, if it's not, it's never.
But that's what it looks like on the surface, though. As soon as I say the disparity, as soon as I say that black kids have less opportunity than white kids, and you bring that to that type of audience, they're going to be like, "Oh, so your pain is greater than my pain."
No, but we have to be able to acknowledge and accept that pain is there. Like nobody is denying that there's rural white farmer pain. Absolutely there is, right? There's, like we could make the same argument for farmers. Like you've been in a family of farmers for 2.5 centuries. Like you only know farming. You don't know how to get out of that business. You don't know the other side of, whatever. Then that's pain. Yes, it exists. So if it can exist for you in your world and from your perspective and from your scenario, why can't it also exist in this scenario?
I think bridging that relatability is a huge missed opportunity across the board.
Yeah.
I think that on the surface it's very black and white, like literally.
It's us and them. Yeah, it's mine versus yours.
Right. My pain is this and because my pain is this in this area versus white pain in this area, there you see it just the topic of disparity creates the idea that there's unfair advantage to the white community as compared to the black community, and that
but there is, like,
Yeah. How do you tell somebody that that has experienced generational pain? It becomes extremely difficult for someone to say, just because you're black, and this, I could feel that energy
Yeah.
coming from the other side. That just
Yeah.
because you're black and you go through your type of pain does not make your pain greater than my pain just because I happen to be Caucasian. So
Fair.
you're comparing me to a statistic, and
Nobody.
you're saying it's like a reverse biased almost. You're
Yeah.
assuming when you say that white people technically have more access to black education, you put me in a box because you're making the assumption that I've had more access to education than you. You know what I mean?
Well, you have though, right? I mean, that's a
It,
fact. You
it's
have.
very hard, but it's very hard for that audience. I'm not talking about the privilege. I'm not talking about the
Yeah,
white
but I
privilege.
think
This audience.
that's in the conversation, right? Like you have had access,
Mhm.
period. But is it the guilt that you're feeling that you're putting up the fight, that you're resisting? Is it the fact that you didn't take advantage of the access that you had that you're feeling that makes you uncomfortable? Why is it that you're resisting the fact that there's a group of people that continue to be harmed by an education system, and a group of people that aren't? There's plenty of successful black folks in education. There's plenty of successful white folks in education. Nobody's saying that it's all or nothing, but the fact that like you have to reconcile within you why you want to fight the against the conversation of there is a group of people in every statistic and metric that you can measure across the board for across time that says that these folks struggle and have less access and have less success in this current system than others, right? And you could create a farming analogy. Like you can take a couple of crops, and this type of crop never does well. Is it the crop's fault that the crop doesn't grow, or is it the farmers? Is it the agricultural process that limits that crop from growing? So you're not going to blame that type of corn for not growing on that hillside. You're going to blame the farmer for growing it on that hillside.
I get it. It requires when you get emotions involved and when people are going through their own pain, you have to be very, you have to be careful. You have to be careful on how you present something that when somebody's already experiencing their own personal emotional pain.
Yeah,
That's the problem. Because the question is well, is white America experiencing their own personal pain? I think they are.
certainly.
They're on the, white America in general, population wise, is on the decline. There is the argument that the white male at this point is the most endangered species. It will be the most endangered species in America. Do you believe that?
By just pure makeup, like
No,
DNA, and
by
or by targeted.
who was it? It's one of my favorite, and he's a Caucasian, but he's really pragmatic. But he's speaking to it. He's speaking to his white male population. And I think John Hope Bryant spoke to it too. That it's actually the white male. There's not enough employment for white males. I think they were arguing.
Employment?
Yeah, employment opportunities for white males. And presenting in such a way where it's almost like for the white male population, it's actually getting worse for the white male. That's the perception that's being presented out there.
Is that is that the affirmative action argument?
No. This is again. This John Hope Bryant is African American. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he talks about it too. When he talks about why we should have opportunities for everyone, it's because it actually helps the people who need it most, which will be the white male. That the white male will need the most support going forward in the future, because there will be a decline of opportunities, or there currently is a decline of opportunities. I have to look at it. There's two individuals that have spoken about it in the most interesting way, and one of them is John Hope Bryant. He spoke of it in affirming why we need opportunities across the board that help not only minorities but white people, because white people need that support too. Was his argument. And then there's I forget what his name is, but he's popular. He just wrote a book. He was recently featured on Oprah Winfrey podcast or show. And he talks about male development, the importance of males living a fulfilled life. But he's speaking not only to the broad male audience, but he's also speaking in terms of the Caucasian male audience as it relates to this current disparity or this upcoming disparity with regards to men not living fulfilled lives. I think is his premise point.
Yeah, I'd be interested in learning more about that because I have so many questions on like what the perspective is, because like I immediately think of like, okay, the opportunities for white men are decreasing because of the historical kind of destruction that white males
It says like karma.
to this planet, right? Like yeah.
That's what Mr. Farrakhan would say. He would say God's judgment.
Right? Yeah. I mean it, and like I'm not saying that like I condone it or I necessarily agree with it. But yeah, kind of balancing the shifting the balance of power will kind of create the byproduct of less opportunities for white males. But I would also argue, like, if we really want to have like this existential discussion about this, like it ain't white men that are like, the human race is like really, like, we are in danger. This AI stuff, like there's some AI folks that are out there saying that we're gonna have to transition over to universal basic income in the next 5 years. I don't know if I believe in 5 years, but like AI has the ability to move so fast that it can replace all of our work in a relatively short amount of time. So like there's like that's a whole another rabbit hole to go down. But yeah, I mean the white male, yeah, because I think the as you called it, the karma of it, but the historical like shift of white men having access to all the jobs and have access to all the decision making and within hiring and lending and finance and etc. All that is shifting, right? And you're learning that when you balance and you shift the balance of power and redistribute wealth and opportunity, yeah, it's going to naturally lead to fewer opportunities for the folks in power and give more opportunities for the folks that are coming up for that power. That's
it just reminds me of an argument. I was talking to a black historian on one of my podcasts, and I threw at him this statement that Killer Mike, who's a rapper.
Yeah, I know Killer Mike. I love him.
Yeah, so they were having like I think it was a Revolt Black conference, sort of, and one of the things that he said to me just stood out to me like a sore thumb. And I was like, it still makes me think. He argued, he said, you'll never get rid of the slave class. That there'll always be like a hierarchy of people within the spectrum of have and have nots, and those who work, tirelessly for little, and those who benefit essentially from the work of those, from the efforts of those, those workers. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I would tend to sadly agree with that. but I don't know what the merits of, each class are going to be, in particular if we think about like the world of AI and the world of universal income and that kind of thing. Because I don't know, there's never been in history a society that hasn't had the slave or peasant class, and the have versus the have-nots. So what does that even begin to look like if like there's equality and equity across the board and everybody has access? Because you have human, what's the word I want to think is I want to use here? You have human input, human impact, right? Because people are going to have addictive personalities. People are going to have mental health issues. People are going to have, the will to fight and want to fight in this direction versus people who have the will to fight in that direction, right?
Right.
You're going to have people that, I love to, like, this isn't a great example, but I love to fish, right? And so like, I just want to, do my thing in my small corner of the world and like fish and have a family, and like I'm gonna have very little. I'll be meager in what I'm able to do, but that's gonna be fulfilling for me, right? And you're gonna have those who want the power and want the prestige and want the fame and want the blah blah blah. And so there'll always be kind of that human element of like separation of wants and needs that will create kind of this peasant class versus upper class, and I think with like mental health and the personality traits and issues and things like that, like there's going to be that, because you have like people that don't want to work hard won't.
Yeah.
People who want to work hard but don't necessarily have the capacity mentally to do those high achieving roles, right? Like I think there's that human element.
Yeah. So then when we talk, when we bridge over to the larger piece of the conversation, are we talking about this is where I get real capitalistic, because I'm a capitalist by nature. Are we really talking about equity and equality, or are we just talking about the opportunity to be competitive? That's a whole that opens up a whole can of a tangent of a conversation, depending on how you answer that.
Yeah, I think it's a both and, right? I think in order for you to have the opportunity to be competitive, you have to have equal footing. You have to have access to the opportunity. You have to have you have to come from a place of comfort.
Do you?
Yeah.
That's that part I don't necessarily agree with.
Why is that?
Because I think competition is the element of creating a certain level of disparity even within yourself to be able to force you into that type of aggressive state in the environment, if that makes any sense. When you look at competition at its roots, it is bred not out of comfort, but it's bred out of going through extremely painful circumstances in order to elevate yourself. It's I don't think it comes from comfort. I don't think being competitive comes from comfort. I think privilege comes from comfort, but not competition.
Yeah. So, well, I think it depends on the perspective. So, if your kids and my kids were to enter into a competition, and that competition was based on something that is very familiar to you and your family, that you guys have like prepared your kids, talked to your kids, actioned with your kids, exercised with your kids, etc. Your kids would come in much more hungry and fiercely competitive than my kids, who were like who haven't had access and exposure to whatever that competition was, right? If my kids haven't talked about and been exposed to that world, I think their fierceness and they're willing to really go in there and compete, not physically, mentally. Like, how do I develop this competitive edge when you're coming in with all these advantages and all this access, Like, yeah, I want to, but if we only have, these few months in this class or in this school to be competitive and figure it out, I'm not going to be able to rise as much as I might be competitive and I want to learn and grow. You're going to have the advantage. So you are going to then shine in that classroom. You're going to get the accolades in that classroom. You're going to get the opportunity in that classroom more so than my kids.
So familiarity creates a drive to be competitive.
Familiarity creates a comfort and a foundation for that competition, right? If me and you jumped on a hockey rink right now, we're both competitive people. Like, we're both at least former athletes now that we're old. We're not going to be like, and you put some folks that have some hockey experience on the ice with us.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Certainly we'll try. We will certainly be as competitive as we're able to be, but are we going to be able to influence the next steps of our hockey journey to the point where we are able to access higher paying hockey jobs in a few years when we don't have that foundation? We have to build our foundation as we are competing versus folks that have that foundation and then come into the competition.
I get what you're saying. It's like we're in a race and you're I mean, it's the analogy of where like you're on a track field, you're racing somebody and somebody's already, 10 meters ahead of you and you're trying to race to the end there. They've got more,
Yeah, or they understand the technique of running. They understand that there's a technique in running and breathing, and we don't. So we can go in and compete, and we could run our butts off. But if we don't have the foundation of technique, we won't find that same level of success. It'll be harder for us to find that same level of success. And we are going to have to work harder over a long period of time to achieve that same level of success. So we might be equally as competitive, but the access that we were given, that we were born with, that we were provided, is going to have an impact on what level of success we can reach early on, because we're at a disadvantage of building our foundation as we're competing.
I can accept it for right now. I've got about 1,000 thoughts of.
But that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that we could win the hockey game. We could be quick learners. We could be naturally gifted. We could have other opportunities and other advantages that make us better than some of those other hockey players. So then we do ultimately, some of us will succeed, right? The analogy you use in the race, 10 meters ahead. Some of us are going to some of us are just going to be naturally stronger and faster and in better shape and better health to win that race. Absolutely. But if you are looking at the group as a whole, there's going to be outliers on both ends, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking of. I think my headspace is around. There's too many variables in the equation rather than just familiarity that are markers of success. Probably what my headspace is going.
Yes, I agree with that.
That familiar is one of them, but you can be familiar and not have in that comfort actually be a detriment to your ability. That's why they say that second and third generation people who inherit money, where it gets passed, it almost gets dwindled. It's very hard to maintain wealth throughout the legacy from one child to the next, because there is that familiar. It actually becomes a curse, and you actually see that actually in the. I mean, ironically, I see I see this conversation happening with kids who are like the children of farmers and farmers, like chiding with their children because their children have been raised under this comfort and familiarity, and when they're bred to that, when they're bred underneath that, it sometimes does the opposite. It sometimes makes them less competitive. I would argue,
just like I said, they're the outliers, right? There's going to be outliers, both sides, both ways. Absolutely. Okay. So nothing is an absolute. Nothing means nothing means that one group or one method is going to work for 100% and for some and 100% failure for the rest. Absolutely not, right? There's a million variables that come into it. But if you're looking at, as I was reading these statistics to you earlier, like if you look at, and we're talking, bring it back to the main argument about access to education. If you look at the collective, there's going to be outliers on both ends, right? So, but what's the mass and what's happening? Yeah. And then it becomes a discussion of, can we accept that it's not a my pain versus your pain? Can we accept that there is an issue
Right.
this group of people is experiencing, and there should be at least some attention given to it.
Right.
And it doesn't
Right.
mean that because we give attention to this, we're not giving attention to the farmers, right? As the example was earlier.
No, but I think sometimes in the argument we can get lost in that comparison rather
Yes.
than
Yes.
taking the issue for what it is, that there is a disparity in, do we want to solve it and how do we solve it, rather than getting so caught up in the narrative of disparity that we miss that there's a problem, and that it doesn't mean that my problem is greater than your problem, but this is a problem. You know what I'm saying? That's the, when you use the word, when the words disparity and those things come to mind, I think it triggers a very traumatized white community who for years have been like challenged to have white guilt.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And then you
Yeah.
get this reverse defensive effect rather than saying, no. Like you said, you have your issues and we're not trying to make your issues greater than our issues, but this is a problem within this. And there is a clear divide that seems to be based off of race. But the issue is not the race. The issue is that somebody's losing. And do we
Yes.
want anybody to lose? So,
And you white farmers are losing just as much as all these black students, right? So
Right.
a rising tide floats all boats. So if we can address this access issue
right.
with a focus on this mass of black and brown bodies that are failing repeatedly, that also addresses the white issue. But we have to come
Right.
from a level setting point of, it's not an us against them and me against you. Like, there is an issue. Do we want to solve it? Here's how it is. Like, you can think back, one of the things we talk about here in San Diego is the curb cut. You ever heard of curb cut? Curb cutting, like literally, how we have curbs that are cut.
Yeah. Okay.
So
okay.
that curb cut came out of, was a product of World War One, maybe one or two. I think it was World War One, where we had all these veterans coming back that were, dismembered and whatnot, and had, these issues and physical issues returning from war. And the curbs were pretty high back in the day. And so the government eventually started cutting the curb to create those on-ramps for our vets to be able to maneuver around their communities. Well, the curb cut was a specific challenge facing our veterans, but it also helped the elderly. It also helped the disabled. It also helped, small children. It also helped, obese people. It helped all of these people with access, but it was the issue was centered and brought and focused on our war vets.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's the same. It's that same theory. Like, if we're focusing on the problem of access to education and access to, like community-based learning or whatever it is in schools that we're looking to access, just simply because this face or this group is attached to it does not mean that the impact won't impact all of our students in a positive way.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I think is helpful in the conversation when we talk about this stuff is not only trying to dispel this idea of one person's pain is greater than another person's pain, but what is the benefit of instituting something like this that helps out everybody across the board, no matter who it is? So, solid points. All right, Aaron, I got to go. Top of the hour. I ate up too much of your time, anyways. One of these days I'm going to end up getting caught up in a 2-hour session with somebody by accident, but it won't be in the afternoon.
It won't be today.
But no, this is good. We're in the same realm of support. With regards to how do we support people in general. We're in the human service industry, and I find these conversations very, very much. How do I put it? There's kindred spirit as it relates to what you're saying, and I can very much relate to what you're saying, but also can appreciate that we think differently, and that's the part that I was trying to sort of bring out at the end there. So I also appreciate you being able to sort of broaden your discussion points to sort of like try to like figure that piece out at the end. So
but I do think that's like, we'll never move the needle if we're not willing to advance our level of thought, right? And like understand that there's another perspective out there that has to be in some way kind of ingratiated into our thinking, right? We have to be able to take your perspective into account and have meaningful conversation dialogue from there, right? And it can't be us against me against you. If we're trying to solve problems,
Right.
it can't be a me against you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said as far as the last word there. So I'm gonna let you go with that, my brother.
All right, brother. I'll let you. Let's do it again.
Yes, yes.
All right. Bye.